A main line of attack resorted to by Marxists hostile to Engels in his Dialectics of Nature is one sadly mirroring an all too familiar non-Marxist canard. This commonplace refrain mindlessly writes off Marxism in its multifaceted entirety by equating it wholesale with Stalinism. According to this popular and oft-repeated mantra, Stalin's USSR is the inevitable and logically consequent outcome of Marx's ideas, with the reality of bureaucratic state terror purportedly revealing, with the benefit of 20th century historical hindsight, the unrealistic and disaster-prone 19th century utopianism of communism's champions. Opponents of a dialectical materialism integrated with the natural sciences, this includes a number of Western Marxists, sometimes might be tempted to conjure up the ghost of Stalin's favored barefoot scientist, the Ukrainian agronomist Trofim Lysenko. Lysenko represents for Soviet science what Stalin represents for really existing socialism as a whole, namely a terrifying nosedive into rigid dogmatism, superficial polemics, cynical institutional maneuvering, and paranoia-driven purges. Just as the figure of Stalin serves anti-communists as ostensibly a reduction to the absurdly horrific of Marxism in its entirety, so too does Lysenko serve anti-Engelsians in rationalizing their rejection of every conceivable dialectical materialist philosophy of nature and science. No self-respecting Marxist accepts as valid and compelling the stale anti-Marxist argument using Stalinism to condemn Marxism überhaupt. Any Marxist who turns around and exploits Lysenkoism as the corresponding scientistic subvariant of Stalinism to deploy the exact same type of argument against dialectical materialist appropriations of the natural sciences should be ashamed. Similarly, not only must today's radical leftists cease feeling pressured into interminable self-flagellation by all those to their right who demand they paralyze themselves into inaction by infinitely apologizing for the miseries of really existing socialism. Marxist thinkers at the dawn of the 21st century ought to stop saying they're sorry for the tragedy of Lysenkoism. Before doing this, some contemporary Marxists first will have to learn and appreciate the historical truth that they have been standing in the shadows of this, their unconscious guilt, for quite a while already. At this moment, I cannot resist a passing invocation of Walter Benjamin's deservedly famous and celebrated essay, Theses on the Philosophy of History. With this reference in view, I would suggest that Engels' dialectical materialist engagement with the sciences and the carrying forward of this project, primarily by Soviet Marxists in the early 20th century, is, for the past 50-plus years of radical leftist political thinking in the West, a, quote, image of the past that is not recognized by the present as one of its own concerns, end quote, which, as Benjamin goes on to warn, quote, threatens to disappear irretrievably, end quote. In his sixth and following thesis on the philosophy of history, he cautions, quote, even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he wins, and this enemy has not ceased to be victorious, end quote. Historical materialism a la Benjamin combats these dangers by, quote-unquote, brushing history against the grain. Moreover, a Marxist historical materialist also is obligated to brush the history of Marxism itself against the grain, at least from time to time, and especially in situations of crisis.